All right, I think that's my cue then. Thanks everyone and welcome. My name is Eduardo Nunes. I'm the Vice President of Science and Practice at AABB, formerly known as the American Association of Blood Banks. And I have the honor today of moderating this panel of truly exceptional people. And I think it's one of those great examples of these improvised communities that have had to spring up in response to the pandemic. I've been on a number of calls with pretty much everyone who's here today over the last several months talking about COVID-19 convalescent plasma. And today we're going to spend a good deal of time on that, hearing both about the science and about the importance of raising awareness among our younger donors of the benefits of convalescent plasma, and to help you all understand the process by which you can figure out where to donate, if you're eligible to donate, and hopefully to empower all of you among the audience to go out and serve as change agents and help drive this important work forward. So thanks and welcome to all of you and to our panel. I'm going to turn it over now for introductions, and we're going to start with Dr. Nigel Paneth.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. I'm Nigel Paneth. I'm a professor of epidemiology and pediatrics at Michigan State University. And I'll just take a moment to explain the idea behind convalescent plasma. Convalescent plasma is an example of what we call creation of passive immunity. Active immunity is when you get a vaccine, but a vaccine has to be given well before the disease starts to prevent, and you create your own antibodies as a result of the vaccine. But if you're already sick, there's another use of antibodies, and that is the use of preformed antibodies. And one great source of preformed antibodies is people who have recovered from the disease you want to treat. And so people can donate plasma, which is rich in antibodies, after they've recovered from COVID-19, and that can be transfused into people who are sick with COVID-19, ideally early in the course of the illness, and that can very much improve the outcome. We're fairly well convinced of that. We've done a lot of studies on that, and perhaps later in this webinar we'll talk about the evidence base for thinking that convalescent plasma really works. I'll just mention also that there are two other forms of passive immunity: the monoclonal antibodies, which are produced in the laboratory and designed to attack the virus of the choice, in this case COVID-19, and also hyperimmune globulin, which is in effect a distilled convalescent plasma from many, many hundreds or even thousands of people into a small amount that can be given as a shot. And in fact, the process of convalescent plasma, using it to help people, dates back, if you can believe this, to the 1890s. It's one of the oldest treatments medicine knows, one of the oldest treatment, and it was shown to be very effective, and it was the mainstay of the treatment of serious infections until we got antibiotics in the 1930s and 40s. So that's a quick introduction, and now I'd like to introduce you to John Kerner, who has been a leading figure, continues to be a leading figure in the federal government in the helping us to administer and to provide convalescent plasma. John.
Thank you for that, Nigel. And I think that it's very important to understand some of the context as to how the federal government has been involved with convalescent plasma, as well as some of the other interventions for COVID over the course of the last almost a year now. And there is a spectrum of care that's involved, and you're all familiar with the diagnostics. You're familiar with the otherwise known as testing. You're familiar with now with the vaccines. But there is that space where plasma-derived therapeutics really have an important place in the battle against COVID. And that is with the monoclonal antibodies, that is with plasma for direct transfusion. My work with the federal government through the COVID pandemic has really been about leadership and about understanding the environs and the ecosystems that exist in various places. Many people would say that it's impossible for someone from Washington to be able to conduct community-based interventions, and that is looking at the networks, looking at the champions that are in the public health and medical systems across the country, and really trying to help to put them together. And I think that with this audience, it's very important for these young leaders who are intelligent, who are motivated, to understand that in the recruitment and awareness activities surrounding convalescent plasma and other interventions regarding COVID, that this is an opportunity, one, to meet that internal desire to give back to the community, but also to demonstrate your leadership as the decades will unfold in front of you. And with that, I'm looking at handing over the mic to Nicole, who is a COVID survivor, and will very welcome her introductory thoughts.
Hi, I'm Nicole Knudsen. I've been a student athlete all my life. I've played hockey since I was a little girl. And unfortunately, in July, I contracted COVID-19 when I think I was working. And although I didn't really have it so bad when I actually had the virus and was sick, but not horribly sick, the after effects have changed my life forever. And I've been dealing with physical pain, mental instability from the long-term effects of having COVID. And I've been to so many different doctors. I've had blood pulled over 30 times, and nothing points to any other diseases besides this mystery COVID virus. And I've spent a lot of this year and a lot of 2020 just trying to figure out what is wrong with me and trying to fix what this virus has done to my body. And it's just been a roller coaster. And I've been a college athlete. I'm a junior and I had to quit playing hockey, and it's been a roller coaster. I've just dealt with so many different things. I still get mystery symptoms to this day, and I'm trying my best to deal with them. And I just hope people out there know that this can affect people my age and people who obviously are older. And I'm just hoping everyone can really take this and use it to their advantage and help people like me and so many others out there who are dealing with this horrible virus. And now I'm going to give it to Diana.
Nicole, my heart hurts for you. I spend my days and nights, as you know, thinking about long-term COVID and how surviving COVID does not mean recovering from COVID. So thank you for sharing that. It's so important to understand that it's not just a matter of life and death, but it's keeping people from a lifetime of pain and organ damage. My name is Diana Berent. I'm the founder of Survivor Corps. We are the largest COVID movement in the world. I got COVID early on. I was one of the first non-healthcare workers to get a positive PCR test back in March around the New York City area. And I spent 18 days in isolation because we didn't know how long one was affected for. And during that time, I became completely obsessed with convalescent plasma. Mount Sinai had the first convalescent plasma program up and running in the United States, and they were in desperate need of people who were who could test negative on a PCR and were 14 days symptom free. And there were just very, very few of us at that time, and very few people who had come forward with their identity. And so emails were going around like chain mail looking for survivors. And I became fascinated, and I started to understand how it had been used since the 1890s and how the Nobel Prize was won for it in 1901, and this incredible history and the power of what, here I was, one of the first people. You never think that you're going to be the first on the block to get the plague, right? But then to realize that my body did exactly what it was supposed to do. It encountered a novel virus new to the entire world, and it created antibodies, which was sort of like I created an internal hazmat suit that I realized I was then able to share with other people, not give it away, because you keep on making those antibodies with muscle memory. You're not giving away your immunity, but you're sharing it. And it was so inspiring that I decided to start a movement, which is now Survivor Corps, with the mission of mobilizing an army of survivors to donate their plasma and support science in every possible way. Because inside the bodies of survivors are the answers to so many of these mysteries about this virus. And the first thing I did when I came out of isolation was I hightailed it to Colombia, where I was their first convalescent plasma donor. I happen to be AB positive, so I am a universal donor. My first donation went to research, and my 7 subsequent donations went to direct patient transfusion. And I kept on donating until I didn't have any antibodies anymore. And I have to tell you that those experiences of donating and having encouraged thousands and thousands and thousands of others to do the same will go down as being one of the things I am most proud of in my entire life. Sometimes you don't need to wear a white coat to be able to save lives, and that is extraordinarily powerful. And with that, I would like to introduce Aviva Klein, who is become not only a colleague, but a friend and comrade in arms in this fight for plasma. And she's with University Blood. So take it away, Aviva.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction, Diana. And excuse me if I'm a little bit emotional, but between you and Nicole, truly, it's very touching. And this is exactly why I do this. So I am the CEO and founder of the University Blood Initiative, which I will go into the background a little bit later. But while we were originally focused on, of course, collecting blood products, I actually remember distinctly getting an email from one of John Kerner's associates, Lola, and thinking, oh, this is a spam email. What is the government doing emailing me? How could this be possible? I'm like, okay, we're just going to give it a shot. Let's see if it's real. And so coming to this email, I got brought into this world. And like Diana, I came to realize how important it was to not just, address the huge blood shortages in this country going on during COVID, but also the intense need for plasma and how important plasma is towards saving lives, as Dr. Penneth will explain, especially early on in the treatment. And, I know, and so of course we're targeted toward young and diverse students, but also members of the community. But I think what's really amazing is, of course, in this phone call, we have scientists, we have members of the blood community, we have amazing activist groups like Diana's and Survivor Corps. But what I really want to emphasize here is that every person watching this video today, we need you to be involved. We need you to be engaged, and not to put down John Kerner and all the other wonderful top-down institutions, but we are only going to make the COVID revolution happen by having people like you stir the fight. And as someone who was shy, who was afraid to speak in front of people, who never thought they were going into business, who now is a nonprofit, when I say I really do believe that everyone here is a change maker, whether you're a university student, whether you're a 50-year-old person living in your community, I mean it. And now, by joining Donation Nation, you have the training and support of not only University Blood Initiative, but AABB and Survivor Corps, and even the federal government. And that's pretty amazing that you're leading the charge. So with that, I hope that wasn't too long. I tend to ramble. But with that, I want to introduce Chaim, who is probably one of my favorite people on this earth. So Chaim, take it away.
Thank you, Aviva. So I got involved before I even knew what COVID is. So what happened was Dr. Panet and a group of these old doctors who have this weird notion that you can fix new problems with old solutions, had these conference calls where they were thinking of how can they help avoid and fight COVID even before COVID hit, the United States. So a couple of people actually in that group were friends of mine. And one of them is out of Johns Hopkins, Dr. Shmuel Shaham. And every time I called him, he was like, I'm busy with this plasma thing. I'm like, yeah, whatever. So finally, one day I see myself CC'd in an email that he sent to one of the other members of that group, Dr. Pravsky out in Albert Einstein, that she should call me on my cell phone to get donors. And I called Shmuel, like, goodbye. I said, Shmuel, I'll get you the donors, but tell me exactly how much money are you looking for? He's like, no, Chaim, you missed it. I need people to donate plasma. I'm like, okay, I'll get you 500 people. What do you need? So finally, we found out what the rules were, who was qualified to donate. And understand this is mid-March, and at that point, there were no rules exactly as who qualifies as a donor. The blood bankers were all new to it because there was no rules. There were no hospitals really having an interest in it, other than the couple of these old guys. Sorry, Dr. Panet, who were all entrenched in it. And you're mute, so we can't hear you. That's perfect. And we had to figure out exactly how are we going to do this. So I reached out, to Dr. Paravsky and Dr. Joyner from Mayo and Dr. Shaham, and we were able to figure out exactly what the rules were. They were a bit more complicated than we wanted it to be. The following weekend, Dr. Shaham and Dr. Joyner sent me a text message if I can get on a phone call with them. And at that point, we decided that it may be beneficial to get Mount Sinai involved. I reached out to Dr. Rich from Mount Sinai, and it took, I would say, less than 3 hours. He was all on board. At that point, the challenging part for us was a couple of things. Get the blood bankers who are willing to collect. This is, Turton was probably the last week of March, where everyone was on panic time and everyone was locking up. Find out who qualifies. And the initial qualification, you had to have a positive test and a negative test. There were no antibody tests at that point. The problem was nobody had a positive test because there weren't any tests available. Now we are looking for people at that point. Again, this is still in March, for people who are 14 days post or beginning 28 days post symptoms, which means that they had it sometime at the end of February. So that's like the first load of people who got it. There was nobody who qualified. So we had to work with some of the blood bankers or the medical directors of the blood bankers, as well as some of the people in diagnostics, to find out or to come up with something other than the original positive test to qualify people to donate. At that point, actually, Einstein had developed a test, an old-fashioned ELISA test to check the titers. Same thing with Mount Sinai. Both of them combined were able to test about 250 people per day, and that's for the whole country. The issue was, number one, to get the people there or set up the drives to test people for antibodies, and the second thing was we still needed people at that point to be 28 days post symptoms. Almost nobody was 28 days post symptoms. Dr. Shaz, who is currently at Duke, who was the chief medical officer at New York Blood Center, said, she's willing to go out on a limb and say 14 days is enough. Kind of interesting that a couple of weeks later, the FDA actually adapted that, so that worked out, extremely well. My whole point when I'm going through this whole thing was I knew nothing about convalescent plasma. I had no clue actually what it does. And to be fair, I didn't even ask Dr. Sharma or any of the other physicians exactly how it works because it didn't make a difference to me. At that point, it was, I'm going to be busy with this for about 2 weeks. Then I'm going to be back with my shoes and have nothing to do with these silly blood bankers that I never worked with. It took it was probably 2 or 3 days, and I realized, Chaim, you're in this for a long time. You better learn the landscape, understand all the blood banking, the whole blood banking industry, understand how the blood bankers interact with the hospitals, and figure out how we can get the most donors possible to the blood banks. Now, what we have to understand at that point is hospitals were all in a panic. There was no good data on anything. The blood bankers are most probably the highest regulated industry on the planet. And we have to make all this work while there's a pandemic. Getting was probably 150 to 200 phone calls on my cell phone from patients' families who have COVID. And we had to navigate it. So my first decision was the only way to make this work is to decentralize it as much as possible. So as smart as I think I am, and as gifted as I think I am, I'm still not the smartest, I'm not the most gifted, and even if I would be, I wouldn't be able to do everything myself. So what we did was identify where there were outbreaks at that point. This again was probably the last week of March, where there were outbreaks early so people were already qualified, where to get them tested and find out a mechanism how to test them for antibodies, and then what blood bankers we can send them to go and donate. So what we figured out was the first one we actually did was in New Rochelle and Westchester because they had the first outbreak. That was still in March. And then what we did was we split up in every community, identify a couple of people who would be capable of running a blood testing drive or donation drive, give them the logistical information that they needed so that they can set up the drive. Now, I would say by the end of April, we had roughly 10,000 people who actually donated plasma. None of them ever knew anything about blood banking, about blood donations, or any of these things. My only experience with blood donations was I once had I once donated, not plasma, I'm gonna have to remember what it was, at Sloan. It's probably about 25 years ago, and they stuck 2 needles to 2 of my arms, and I fell asleep 30 seconds later because I had nothing else to do there. And the poor nurse thought that I fainted. She came running, I'm like, why did you wake me up? She's like, no, you have to stay awake. I'm like, either change from the cooking show to something sports, and I'll stay awake, or put on summer music, because otherwise I'm just gonna fall asleep. So I knew nothing about blood banking. I knew nothing about convalescent plasma. But the only thing I knew was that I can't sit idle. And if there is a possibility that something is gonna work, not to do it. Have to have something that the people who are being diagnosed and have absolutely no hope or no knowledge of any therapeutics at that point to do nothing, to tell them, sorry, I can't help you. So we did everything possible to try to set up these drives. The bottom line is we had a bunch of people who had no experience in blood banking, no experience in medicine, no background in medicine. What we all had was a will to do, a will to help, a will to ask others to do, and not taking no for an answer. And at the end of, one of the toughest things was, again, this is first week in April, to convince hospitals to actually give it. So, that was where I got involved in it. I can see Dr. Panet looking back, he's like, yeah, he remembers this was a couple of centuries ago, about 10 months ago, I know. And, I can't even say that I feel good about it yet. Once COVID is over for about a year or two and everything is back in check, maybe I'll have a coffee or something else to drink and say, you know what, I made a good job. Up until that point, I feel we all of us, meaning everybody in this country or everyone around, to do our part, whatever we can do to try to help the people who are less fortunate and get COVID. The weird thing was, by the beginning of April, I actually got COVID myself. My whole family got COVID. So, I'm a big guy, so my donations are worth about 4 doses per donation. So I donated 8 times, my son donated 8 times. The one thing I'm happy about my son, because now he's going and he's donating platelets every 2 weeks. So he became a good blood donor. I told him it's one of the good habits, a guy in his 20s can have. So, that's my basic background and connection to convalescent plasma.
I just want to jump in really fast because this is why I love Chaim, because Chaim is the ultimate motivational speaker. And again, I want to emphasize, if an undergraduate, a shoe salesman who is much more than a shoe salesman, but he'll never admit it, and a brilliant photographer like Diana, if we can all say, hey, we care, we can do something, then, you know, God darn it, everyone watching here can do it too. And this is, if you take nothing else from this webinar, it's that if you care and you want to help, we will take you and teach you and support you and get you on the ground level to do amazing things, and we will back you up 100%. You get nothing else. You forget all the other facts that Dr. Paneth and Mr. Kerner and Eduardo are going to give you. Just take that away. We believe in you, and you can do it. And with that, I'm going to stop interrupting and let Eduardo transition.
Thank you, Aviva. That's so well said. This really is a humbling panel, and it's just a reminder of how many stories of just incredible bravery and selflessness have come out of this really challenging time. And it's a reminder too that, you know, we're hurting, but we're strong and we're united. And I think the blood banking community has felt just incredibly privileged to be able to play a role in this. And so thank you to all of you. You know, in a sense, we sort of have a microcosm of everyone who's been part of this effort. We have research, we have the US government, we have, you know, incredible change agents who have helped the public connect with the act of blood donation and helped, you know, connect, you know, we talk about a vein to vein connection that's really embodied by the folks here today. So, so thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We are gonna switch into some Q&A now, and we'll run through a couple of different topics here. I'm gonna start us off by going to Nicole. You know, Nicole, I think your story really resonated with a lot of us. I think you could hear that in how we responded. And truly stories like yours have sort of, you know, not been really centered as part of the narrative during this pandemic. And so, you know, I want to really thank you for sharing that with us. There are a couple of questions that came in, I think, from folks who want to understand how to work with younger patients who might have experienced you know, who might have had bad, severely ill cases, such as yours. So we have a question from a collegiate coach from Ohio, who submitted a question about what advice would you give to another student athlete if they went through what you went through? How would you help them understand and put into context what that experience is?
So I'm actually still learning from this myself and trying to do what I can to just make myself feel better. And I guess I've learned so much of myself, and I did not think I was this strong. And I guess my thing was I would tell them not to lose hope, and because it is so easy with this virus, it is so unpredictable, it is so unknown. Just don't lose hope. And it's something I still struggle with, trying not to lose hope. But you just got to do everything in your power to control the controllables. And whether that's eating right, taking your vitamins, having a proper support system, going to different doctors, connecting with others like myself, and sharing your story, because like you said, a lot of people don't know that this virus can do this and just wreak such havoc on a healthy person like myself. And just know that you aren't alone, and do everything and anything you can to make yourself feel better, because like I said, it is today I had a really hard day and had more symptoms arise, and I was on the phone with my doctors, like crying to them, because I'm still going through this, and I'm still struggling with what do I do. But like, I want others to know that if they are going through this, that you aren't alone, and that you got to stay strong and not give up, because it's so easy to give up and say, this is how I'm going to feel for the rest of my life. But you really can't, because that's just going to make it worse. And I know I'm not the only one out there, which is comforting. I wouldn't wish this upon anyone, but just knowing that you're not alone and finding a support system. And like, I just can't believe Survivor Corps, I've posted that Facebook group chat so much, just connecting with others and hearing that I'm not alone with those, like with the randomest symptoms that I didn't even know like anyone else could have. I thought I was alone. Just knowing that I wasn't alone gave me comfort. And obviously I don't want anybody else to feel that way. It's nice to know that I'm not alone.
You're not, and I think you're, you know, you're here with people who are standing in solidarity with you. And I think, Chaim actually wants to speak to that a little bit.
Nicole, obviously I don't know you, okay? I mean, this is the first time we met on this call. There are a couple of things that are very important to know, okay? One of the best answers that I ever got on a question related to COVID was I called Dr. Panet and asked him a question. And his reply was, call me back in 5 years, I should have a good answer for you.
Exactly.
So there's a lot that we don't know. There is another huge issue that even some of the information that is known to some is not known to all. So I'll give you an example. What we found, a lot of patients that had childhood asthma, after COVID, that asthma came back. Some people didn't realize they struggled. Most of them only had it for a short period of time, some of them a couple of weeks, some of them a couple of months. There are a decent amount of healthy, fit, young individuals who got COVID and had lagging symptoms for a while. And some of the things that have been seeming to help, which didn't make sense to me, but some of my physician friends told me to try and work, is the same type of physical therapy you would do right after someone's in ICU for an extended period of time. I don't know what you tried, what you didn't try, and I'm not a physician, I can't give you medical advice, but you should definitely look into that. I think one of the most important things we can all do as individuals is to make sure that all the information available to any of us should be available to all of us, and we can help so many patients all across the country and all across the globe. The same concept that drives us to help with convalescent plasma collection is the ones that help us with all the different types of availability of information, of knowledge on therapeutics that we need to share. So you most probably saw I emailed you in person, in private. Any way that any of us can help you, we want you and anyone listening to this call to know that we are all here to help any individual out there to get through this, the easiest way possible.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's nice to know, like, I mean, at first I didn't know that there's so much support and just references of where to go. I didn't know that. And then my mom actually introduced me to the page, and it's just amazing to see how many people have come together and are really trying to work towards making everyone feel better and getting this under control.
And Nicole, also realize that while the medical and scientific answers might be a few years away, we are finding things that are functionally helping people. Like I did cranial sacral occupational therapy, which was much more helpful than any of the multitude of doctor's appointments I went to. I wear compression pants every single day because it helps to repair the vasculature. I did a gut biome test and custom probiotics because there's a big connection between disruption of the vagus nerve and its ability to control the gut biome after COVID. I've been using a vagus nerve stimulator that is, you can get it. It's actually approved for at-home COVID use. It has an EUA, but nobody knows about it. So there are ways that we can be using food as medicine. There are foods that you can use that are anti-inflammatories, that act as interferons, that act as the drugs that are available yet because they haven't been tested in this capacity. So even though we will be the ones who push science ahead on this, you and me and everyone on this call, but don't give up faith that we can't make you feel better before we have the exact medical answers.
Yeah, and that like I said, I appreciate you. It's just, it's just so comforting to hear that. And it's still, you said, I'm still learning stuff every day, new stuff, trying new stuff. And it's really comforting to know that others are, doing the same and, sharing this
What
and
works and what
yeah,
doesn't.
exactly.
It's crowdsourcing,
Mhm.
and it is a real reminder that we are looking at the wrong metrics. We need plasma because we want to keep people from the virus replicating, from the virus doing this sort of damage. It's the cases that aren't treated at all where you end up like I've had issues not as profound as Nicole's, but so many of us who had what I call the Tylenol and Gatorade kinds of COVID, which can now be, you can get monoclonal antibodies and hopefully never get into that space. And if you're admitted to the hospital, you have to ask for plasma, and you have to be your own best advocate through this whole process and use every resource that you have available. Our Survivor Corps website, Survivor Corps CORPS, is a tremendous resource on where you can donate plasma, where you can get monoclonal antibodies delivered to you in your home through home infusion within 24 hours, locations of every long-term COVID care center around the United States. You name it, it's all there. It's a tremendous resource in how you can contribute to research, ongoing research. There are trials who need you, who want you, and ways for you to then share your voice with the media, because that is so important that young people understand that this is not the flu. This isn't just a few days and done. And the other thing that we have to really keep in mind is that this need for plasma is real and ongoing. Literally moments before I got on this call, I got an email from a friend whose relative is in a hospital in New Hampshire and cannot get plasma. And this person's life is probably on as we speak. And so the second I get off this call, we need to make sure that we get this person those blockages would be lifted. Those barriers would be lifted if our supply was larger. And so if you are young, if you are if you are not suffering from long-term COVID, if you're feeling okay, or you had an asymptomatic case, you now have the power to save lives. And so it doesn't matter what grade you got in your last science class, you have the capacity to save 3 to 4 lives with every 27-minute donation, which is literally 27 minutes. It's not even as hard as giving blood, because you sit next to the centrifuge and it spins out the plasma, which is like the amber watery part where all the antibodies live, and they give you back your red and white blood cells. And again, like Chaim, I didn't know any of this before a year ago. I'd never heard of convalescent plasma until I got COVID in March. I've been taking a science class since 10th grade. None of it matters. By May, between Chaim's work and my work, there was a 3-month waiting list to give blood at the New York Blood Center. Let's get back to those times. Let's flood the market, because again, there's also going to be fewer and fewer people as more and more people are vaccinated, unless the rules are changed, to be giving plasma. So we need the people who have not yet been vaccinated, who got through it okay. You can now save lives. It will be the most profound experience of your life. I promise you, through and through. And just like Chaim and his son, even though I can't give antibodies anymore because I don't have them, I've signed up to become a regular platelet donor, because it turns out I'm a platelet super donor. And so I am now a lifelong blood donor because of this. And that's extraordinary. We all can be. I say all the time that I think that one of the great difficulties of this COVID era has been the message that we've all been given, which is the best thing you can do is to literally do nothing. And while that is technically true, if you have the capacity, if you have the ability to stay home and not go out, if you're not an essential worker, please stay home. If you have to go out, double mask, wear eye protection, take it all really, really seriously. But it is part of the human spirit to want to help. We want to be the helpers. There is something innate that is hardwired into us. And what better expression of that than getting to be a superhero, to run towards the fire, and that fire is COVID.
Yeah, I just want to jump in because once again, not to be a shill, but this is a great example of what the Push4Plasma community is and what we do. And like Diana said, so I would consider UBI to be like the structural base, and the chapters that we're building now to get people in plasma, not only to get plasma, to get whole blood and platelets, which are also in terrible supply and are also killing people and patients who can't get blood, like in trauma. This is a lifelong initiative. Survivor Corps and helping survivors keep going out, UBI and helping to maintain the blood supply with young and diverse donors in community chapters. This is the lifelong community you could be entering into, which I just want to underscore and remind everybody here. So with that, Eduardo, what is our next section?
Well, you guys have teed us up very nicely for some discussion of change agents. So, you know, just to set the context here a little bit, over the last few weeks, nationwide in the US, we've distributed around 19 to 20,000 units of convalescent plasma a week. It's trending a little bit downward. It sort of follows the trend of the epidemic. But that's about as high a number as we've seen for weekly totals. There was a point at which we were looking at about 30,000 units. And again, we are in decline, which is good news. But it's very precarious and very touch and go. And to Diana's point about vaccination, there is some confusion about whether vaccinated individuals can donate or not, and they can. There are a couple of criteria that have to be satisfied, and there's interesting early. You know, we're talking about sort of learning this stuff in real time. There's early research pointing to really astonishing antibody production levels in individuals who are recovered and who have been vaccinated. Just after their first shot, their antibody production, you know, increases something like 40 or 50 fold. It's really kind of off the charts. So we are going to continue to look at that. We are in the meantime going to need a lot of donors. And so I want to ask the change agents that we have here, Diana, Chaim, just what are your stories of engaging your community, and what really stands out to you from this time in terms of impact and in terms of how folks have responded to the need for plasma?
I mean, I think that Chaim and I have very different stories. There are definitely parallels. Ours, I mean, Survivor Corps is now an over 150,000 person group. It's extraordinarily diverse. And so we created an ethos where we built people up who had donated plasma. So we started a trend from the very beginning of people posting their donor selfies, as we call them. And then a superhero alert goes out to the entire community, and that person gets hundreds of likes and loves and praise from everybody in the community. And so it just sort of, it created a culture where people would come on and brag about their titer levels. And talk about their experiences and post their photos and encourage each other to do it. And so it became part of the culture of Survivor Corps. It is very much woven through everything that we do. And, you know, it's hard because not all of our members are able to donate because they're not in good enough shape to do so. But those folks also are cheering people on because everybody, we all have one desire, is to get to the end of this. Do you know what I mean? To save as many lives as possible and get to the soonest possible end of this crisis as we can. So I think that, I mean, so that's sort of been our approach. And we've also leaned extremely heavily on earned media. So we've been profiled in well over 3,000 media pieces in the last 10 months. Many of them focused on convalescent plasma. So that was another part of our approach, because we didn't have the infrastructure or the budget to go any other way. Okay.
Yeah, that is a total different approach. And
Yeah.
one of the good things when you have a diverse group of people, everyone has a different approach. And the bottom line is we're all looking for the exact same result, which is help as many people who, try to educate as many people as possible they shouldn't get COVID. At this point, when with other therapeutics involved, that someone who gets COVID, to make sure that you keep them out of the hospital. And if they do get to the hospital, make sure that they know and have the availability to have the therapeutics available in the hospital for them as early as possible. When we started, again, it was probably in March, there were a couple of things that we had to make decisions on. And being that what I consider myself a pretty lazy person, I did not want to have to work very hard. So I always go to the path of least resistance where I'll still get the result that I'm looking for. So what we did was within the community, split up the work or the testing as much as possible. So rather than having one central place running it, we had a bunch of different places running it. At that point, we did not have enough capacity at New York Blood Center. Again, it was probably 15 to 20 donors maximum per day. This is beginning of April. So what we did was we looked around for other blood banks that are out of New York. We went as far as Delaware, Bank of Delmarva, or Miller Keystone in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. So we jammed up what capacity they had. We actually went to some of the hospital blood banks because of all the regulations. Very few hospitals still have their own blood banks. So there are two sets of hospitals that still have blood banks, either the real research hospitals like Memorial Sloan, or some of the hospitals that are really slow moving and that didn't give it up yet. So one of them was Maimonides. They had in Brooklyn, they had their own blood bank. And we actually put together a couple of philanthropists who are willing to donate $10 million worth of equipment. So instead of them having only one machine, they should have 10 machines. And one of the bigger issues were, it wasn't even an issue of the machines, it was more of an issue that there weren't enough bags available. Because all of a sudden, convalescent plasma, how many units of FFP are collected regularly, all of a sudden you're going to thousands a week. And Humanetics did their credit, lend them machines and lend them bags. And we were able to set it up over there. The whole point is, what we did was, again, none of us involved were professionals. We had one goal in mind, which was flood the market, that any patient anywhere in the country whose doctor thinks that convalescent plasma can help them should have access to it within 24 hours. We were able to work as individuals, coordinating with each other to set up like small chapters where we were able to amplify the message, where we had thousands of donors literally within 10 days, 2 weeks. One of the institutions that were very helpful at that point was Mayo Clinic offered us, they put together a protocol for us to test for antibodies, and they offered us to test up to 20,000 people per day. So rather than being able to do 250, 300, all of a sudden it was kind of weird because we put together from Rutgers another 50. Right? We were literally scrapping 10 to 20 or 50 to 100 donors or additional tests per day. And we called them, and the leadership of Mayo said, we can do 20,000 a day. If you're going to squeeze us, we're going to do 30,000. I'm like, they're not even counting the first 4 digits. They were just on a total different planet. But that opened up the capacity of testing people. And we were able to get the message out. What I felt was the best part of the message and why so many people were willing to do it. It's not that often that a person feels my direct donation or my 2 hours of inconvenience will save most probably at least one person. If you look at if high titers given early, the reduction in mortality, there's a good chance you saved at least one life on every donation that you gave. And I felt that it really got people to move. It was kind of cool when we did back in Pennsylvania. We had they never saw, Orthodox Jews there in their life. And they're like 150 of us walking in. Kip Cutner was the chief medical officer, Berent. I told him, I said, Doc, what happened? He goes, you don't realize that by tonight, I can fill all my orders. I'm like, how many orders do you have? I was like, do we need more donors? He goes, 7. I'm like, 7? Okay. We had over 100 donors there for the first day. And it was an extremely good feeling, a gratifying feeling, to be able to help people, especially when I have no clue who they are. So when I donated, I'm like, somebody who's never know who I am, I'll never know who he is. Well, and I have the feeling that I just saved someone's life. It is an amazing feeling to have.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I want us to hold on to that feeling for a few minutes. We're gonna circle back to end with a little bit more on the Push4Plasma effort here, and we're going to let Aviva take us home. But before we do that, I wanted to hear from John Kerner and Nigel Paneth quickly on a couple of different topics. So John, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the U.S. government's response and the effort around the therapeutics side of Operation Warp Speed and the role of plasma in that.
Sure, and thanks for that, Eduardo. Briefly, folks are familiar with the term Operation Warp Speed. That is the full federal interagency effort by which significant and substantial investment has been made to support the rapid development of various medical countermeasures against COVID, to include vaccines, that initial testing rollout that Klein mentioned. Just getting those things on the shelves and, importantly, in the hands of providers as quickly as humanly possible. It is a monumental effort that is unprecedented in history. When we get to the therapeutics, we've mentioned the hyperimmunoglobulin, we've talked about the monoclonal antibodies and about the convalescent plasma. But I think it's important for folks to understand that this isn't just a scientific and public health endeavor. It's truly a community-based endeavor. And that was recognized early on. To it, my initial task here was, John, we want you to take this team of 17 or so people spread across the country and help to double the national capacity for the collection of convalescent plasma within 30 days. Now, Diana, you mentioned, running towards the fire, and you know that I was a veteran and I spent a year in Afghanistan. I've run towards the fire, but never did I feel the fire of the responsibility of 330 million people, and I need to be the guy that helps you all really get to that place. Now, with some investment with the blood centers and the blood banks, in terms of supporting the collection, storage, and distribution of CCP and enhancing the capacity overall, with a massive public health outreach and awareness campaign in partnership with our partners at The Fight Is In Us, we all were able to, importantly, sometimes simply by will, sometimes by a little bit of extra effort and maybe a little pushing and shoving, not just double the nation's capacity by November, but double it again by December, and then increase it another 100% by January. And that's everybody in this place. And I think that for our viewers, I think that the common theme from Nicole through Diana and Chaim and Aviva and Nigel and Eduardo, the common theme that I'm seeing here is really you're looking at a panel that's dedicated to service. You're looking at a panel that has demonstrated extraordinary courage and, very importantly, selfless leadership. And what that does is that creates champions. And that changes just being a warrior into being a champion. And I think that this audience in particular can really benefit by the example here You don't have to be a Fed and, live in my empty building in downtown Washington. You can be a human being that has initiative, that has the will to help others, and that's really all it takes. A little elbow grease and a few phone calls, and it goes a long, long way. And then suddenly, the important thing is someone's going to select you as their leader. And once you've achieved that, you've demonstrated all of those characteristics that I've just described. And you don't appoint yourself leader, you get selected as a leader.
Thank you so much, John, for that perspective and those humbling words. I think everyone on this call has sort of found themselves thrust into a role they maybe weren't expecting to find themselves in, and it's been just amazing to watch everyone respond. I wanted to give Dr. Panath a chance to speak a little bit about some of the skepticism and some of the questions around the efficacy of convalescent plasma. The data have been mixed. I think there is concordance around a few clear areas of benefit and a couple of areas where things are a little bit less clear. Can you give us a little bit of a walkthrough of that? Oh, and Dr. Panath, you're muted.
As we say, it wouldn't be a Zoom call if someone didn't start to talk while still muted. It began in March. A group of us, biomedical scientists, Arturo Casadeval and Michael Joyner and myself had been part of a group who were thinking about larger questions in biomedical science for some years. If you're interested in what we were thinking about, there's a special issue of Perspectives in Biology and Medicine in the autumn of 2018 that you could look at. And we came together essentially because Arturo wrote a very persuasive paper with Lisa Ann Perovsky, who's been mentioned already before, in the Journal of Clinical Investigation, saying, listen, we don't know what we could do with COVID-19, but listen, convalescent plasma makes a lot of sense, just makes a lot of sense. And he also wrote a nice op-ed in the Wall Street Journal about it in February. So we came together, and in rather short order, a whole bunch of academics around the country were joining us in some kind of an informal organization. We had big phone calls. We set out responsibilities. I was at Michigan State University. I somehow got the role of starting a website. What did I know about doing websites? Zero. But you try to jump up to the task, and with good people, we got a lot of suddenly help from Amazon Web Services, from Michigan, my own university's IT department, and suddenly we had a website, ccpp19.org. You can look at it, and we began to think about. And it's important to say, think about convalescent plasma. In March and April, maybe even into May, I was interviewed by national media more than once, and they asked me to make a commitment to say convalescent plasma works, and I said, no, we're studying it. We're studying it. We're trying to figure out whether it works. And they would love to have a patient suddenly, he got convalescent plasma and he got up from his hospital bed and started to do cartwheels. And we're trying to, that's not the way we do messaging in medicine. We have another model. But steadily, the data began to accumulate. But we're in the middle of an epidemic, and we're not in a position to design the ultimate studies and wait for years until the results come in. And by the time the epidemic is over, then a lot of the naysayers will say, it really did work, but it's too late. We've made a terrible error in trying to hold convalescent plasma to a standard of rigorous evidence that is so harsh that if we wait for that to happen, we won't treat anybody. Now, the evidence is very simply stated. There are 10 randomized trials in the public sphere. If you look at them in aggregate, they have all reduced mortality by a total of about 25%. If you look at the ones who treated early in the first 3 days, they have reduced mortality by more than 50%. The numbers are small, admittedly. If you look at the amount of antibody in the convalescent plasma is clearly important. It's the active ingredient. We have shown in the EAP study with the Mayo Clinic that Mike Joyner led that if you had high levels of antibody in the convalescent plasma, there was a much better outcome than if the antibody levels were low. The FDA replicated the study using a different group of patients, using a different antibody test, and got the same result. So this was not an accident. And no one knew at the time of administration what was in the convalescent plasma, how high the antibody level. It's very hard to confound that. You know, and I'm an epidemiologist. I'm a born skeptic. My whole discipline teaches me to question every result and study it under the microscope. But sometime after the announcement of the antibody findings, which convinced, by the way, the FDA to make convalescent plasma widely available, I began to really be moved from the position of scientific skepticism to professional advocacy, because I came to believe that this is really an effective product, but it has to be used in the right way. And the right way is early. Did we know this? We've known this since 1890. That I can show you papers from as early as 1913 saying, if you give plasma early, the result is much, much, much better. And from the most eminent figures in medicine, Simon Flexner, who was head of the Rockefeller Institute, from Cecil, the author of the famous textbook of medicine, the Cecil Loeb textbook that every medical student of my generation studied from, they all wrote about this. Unfortunately, at the beginning of the pandemic, what the FDA did was it authorized it for use in the most sick people, desperately ill people, which one can understand the impulse, but it's exactly the wrong group to treat. And so a lot of the early trials and results were done in people in whom convalescent plasma had no great hope of being effective. It had to be given early. And our message, give early as soon as you can with, of course, plasma that is rich in antibodies, has finally fell on the ears of people who really matter, the FDA, who issued just a few days ago an opinion that convalescent plasma has to be used with high titer antibody and early as you can in the course of illness. I wish they would approve it for outpatient use. They haven't quite gone that far. They're approving it for early inpatient use. We are, as John reviewed, we have been very successful in increasing the amount of convalescent plasma that is being obtained in blood banks. We can do more with the help of many of the people who are watching this webinar, with the help of people like Diana, Aviva, the people who are trying to generate, and of course, Chaim, the greatest generator of plasma that we know of, to get lots and lots of convalescent plasma out there. And my job as a physician educator is to convince everyone, use it, but use it the right way. I've said this on public. I said this even on NBC to Kerry Sanders nationally. I said, if I'm in the hospital on day one with COVID, I want convalescent plasma, and I'm going to be screaming. If I'm capable of screaming that out, I will scream it out. You know, give me convalescent plasma. So I think that it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to support. There are skeptics because the evidence base is not massive. Recently, a big trial, we haven't seen it published yet. We've only seen a headline in a news release from the Great Britain, didn't show a difference in the people treated and not treated. It was a group of people whose overall mortality was 18%, nearly 1 in 5. That tells you that they were studying it in a very advanced disease. That tells you that that is what Simon Flexner warned us about 108 years ago. Use it early, use it early. And that's the problem, unfortunately, we're confronting. So I hope if doctors use it right, if we can follow the FDA guidance on that, high antibody, early usage, we will save many, many lives. And also many admissions to the intensive care unit. We don't have anything better, I think. Monoclonal antibodies are also quite effective in the outpatient space, but convalescent plasma in the inpatient space.
Thank you for that, Dr. Paneth. And I'm going to turn it over to Aviva, because for doctors to use it right, they need to have it in the first place. And I think that's what Push4Plasma is all about, right?
Yes, indeed. So I know, so first of all, I think I have the distinct honor of wrapping it up, laugh and everything. So thanks for that. But I'm sorry, I haven't talked in so long. I can't think clearly, but yes. So let me so I know one of the questions was, what of the UBI? Because a big part of Push4Plasma at the basic level is University Blood Initiative. So basically, University Blood Initiative was built to support independent centers and galvanize the next generation of young and diverse leaders, and also now community champions, and also potentially high school chapters if we get enough interest in high school students. Because in 15 to 20 years, the average blood donor, who is a 41-year-old Caucasian male, he's not going to be eligible to donate blood, and we're going to have massive shortages. And then during COVID, we also took under our wheelhouse plasma. So as part of the Push4Plasma campaign, what we do is, if you're interested in being a community champion, which I will rally you up with the pep talk later at the end of this, what you do is you go to our website, you sign up to be part of a chapter that already exists, you sign up to create a chapter either on a university or at a community level, and we get you started with the toolkit, with the information to push it out there and pump it up, if you will. And I will say that on our webpage soon, if not at the time of this call, is actually a novel CCP screener, in which that when people sign up to donate to see if they're eligible, you will actually have a volunteer assigned to you who will help you sign up at your closest drive. But with that, I would like to sum up with today's call by saying, I know that what Chaim and Diana can say can be a little bit intimidating, but what is the same with everyone is grit, determination. How did I get where I was? Mass emailing to random people who had no idea who I was, calling in favors, making friends and family, harass other friends and family. All it takes to do what we're doing is literally that you care and you're willing to be a little bit, it's like self-conscious to make a phone call. And you can do amazing things. And once you feel good about yourself, you're gonna get higher and higher and higher. Like our students at Rutgers, completely virtual. They filled out a 100-person drive with 2 students. University of Chicago, yay, alma mater. They increased the center 230% during COVID, during the summer when they were virtual. Young people in your community, you can do this. We need you to run towards the fire with us. We need you to join Push4Plasma to make this UBI chapter, because without your support, we can't stop. We can't help. We can't heal people. We can't stop people from getting worse. And I don't want to see any more Nicoles in this world. And I think Nicole would agree that we want to stop people from getting that bad. And that's why we need you. And I'm sorry for getting emotional, but truly, this is not, the typical boring webinar. Everyone here, we're informal. We care about you. We want you not just to save lives, but we're going to turn you into awesome leaders who are going to do fantastic things during COVID and beyond. And with that, that's my very emotional send-off. And I do hope it was compact. I also do want to add on the topic of food as medicine, that as part of this campaign, but couldn't be part of this webinar, is plasmasaveslives.org. And what's the amazing thing about them is that every time you donate plasma, they will donate money to a local food bank to make sure that people are eating healthy. Right. Because I think, as Nicole alluded to, that food is part of health as much as anything else. And I actually do have chronic pain not related to COVID. And every day I eat a very specific blend of anti-inflammatory food so I feel better. And so not only are you joining us, are you saving lives, people who are donating, you're going to save double the lives. You're going to get people plasma and you're going to get people food. That's all I got to say. So thank you, plasmasaves.org. Thank you, Diana. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you, John. Thank you, Chaim. Thank you, Dr. Paneth. I think this has been a great webinar. And I'm very happy that we're all here together as part of Push4Plasma. It really is a family, and I'm very grateful to be part of it.